So this is at home in the cloud, WPCampus Online 2018. Welcome. As I mentioned, I am Jason Cowles. I'm a senior web developer at USC ITS Web Services. If you want to mention this presentation, good or bad, please use the hashtag @HomeInTheCloud. Also keep in mind, this is my first presentation ever at a conference, so if I trip up over myself, it's probably a combination of rocket fuel coffee I had this morning, and I'm a little bit nervous. That being said, I'd like to give a big shout out to James Hong, who none of this project was possible without. He's our systems programmer analyst at USC, and also to WPCampus for having me. So here's a situation, that could really happen anywhere. What if, there were tornadoes with sharks, raining down on LA? Well, when there's sharks raining down on LA, we suddenly have over 50,000 people trying to access our homepage. We have communications trying to post updates and 2 versions of CMS admins, all while possibly fighting off sharks. So in the event of a major emergency for USC previously, we had a blogger site that would take over our www homepage. However, this was an involved process that took decision-making, took people pushing buttons, and, eventually, this overtake would actually happen. It wasn't really fast to get the information out there. If it was a minor notice, our communications group would either take over one of our feature sections or one of the news sections down below. And as you can see, sharks attacks LA. There's probably no imagery to go with that. Our default imagery would be Tommy Trojan. Doesn't really convey the right message. Like, hey, sharks are attacking LA. No big deal. Tommy's just looking up in the sky. So we also had our mobile, which was actually a different site. A mobile site and a desktop site. And there was no emergency notifications unless our blogger site took over our www site. So, if you're running from a shark, you're probably not going to be getting your updates on a laptop, right? So, hey, why would we change any of this? Everything mostly works, right? The complete publishing environment was so complicated that only a few people knew how it worked. Unless it was an emergency site takeover, the updates blended into the content, as I've shown. The primary editors for managing this content would use WordPress for all of their other sites, an older CMS for the homepage, and Blogger for the emergency site. So this is quite a few different admin control panels that have to know exactly, well, where would this message go, and how do I update it, and how do I publish this out? So we needed to get the message out just a little bit faster than we were. Sharks, they don't wait for anyone. So in an emergency, we needed the following. We needed to make sure we had mitigation for huge traffic spikes in both an emergency and non-emergency cases. We needed the ability to use emergency messaging, the visual presentation of that messaging, all to be combined together. We also needed to make sure that we had technical stability. We didn't want a high traffic spike or something, bringing down that site, just when people need that information the most. So, we started developing a primary criteria list for an emergency. For our UX and design, we wanted to make sure that we had a responsive homepage. This was only last year we decided, hey, I think it's time that we got rid of the mobile-only view of our homepage. We wanted to make sure that our emergency notifications appeared on the homepage. And we also wanted to update the site branding to the emergency site. For our administration usability, well, this was an easy one. The people that would be managing the messaging for the emergencies, wasn't within our group, it's within our communications group. They're used to using WordPress, so let's just go ahead and migrate that, from the older CMS to WordPress. For our security and technical considerations, we really need to make sure that we had a resilient, scalable system to handle planned traffic spikes such as commencement, class sign up, items like those, and then the unforeseen emergencies that could potentially come up, sharks and tornadoes. We also wanted to make sure that we decrease our load time. Now, initially, our homepage wasn't slow. It was actually pretty fast. And I'll get into our metrics for that a little bit later in this presentation. But there was room for improvement, so we wanted to make those increases at that time. And more importantly, move our application to the cloud. Our homepage was hosted on our internal VMs, and if a tornado full of sharks takes out our server building, well, then we're not getting that message out to anywhere. So we wanted to make sure that we had something that's out in the cloud, was available for any one of our offices to post to and provide updates to not only the USC community, but to parents, students, and faculty who may be outside of the Los Angeles area to get those updates. So what were some considerations of this? We were moving our entire www to AWS. Or I should really say, we were moving our entire www to another third-party vendor. And we had all these 301 redirects. USC has been hosting stuff for a very long time. So we have a lot of custom URLs. We have a lot of custom redirects and domains out there. And we literally had over 1,000 of these. And this plays into a primary consideration when you're moving off to something that you don't fully control, traffic for redirects, as well as traffic for our homepage, which was getting just on average under 1 million views per month. That really adds up with any consideration for a vendor. Another primary consideration is since we're moving these outside of our own little bubble of what we would control is our authentication for admin users, of making sure everything's secure, using your shibboleth credentials for sign-in to manage users, as well as scaling. How do we auto scale for these planned and unplanned emergency events? And are we exposing ourselves to any security issues by moving outside? So for implementation, a lot of things to think about. Do we have the resources to work on this? We have a lot of current projects. We have maintenance for stuff that's already out there. We have new initiatives down the pipeline. How do we juggle all of this and fit this in within the resources that we have? Also, do we have the skill sets needed? We wanted to move this into WordPress, but also make it highly scalable, resilient. Does that mean, do we develop this in WordPress? Do we build a single page app that just gets us content from WordPress? These are a lot of considerations for the implementation portion that we had to work through. How did we choose AWS? Well, before we choose AWS, we had to ask ourselves, why not use a third-party WordPress vendor? There's plenty of them out there. There's plenty of really good ones out there. And, to be honest, we actually submitted several RFPs to well-established WordPress providers. And, we liked all of them for all different reasons. But, there's one deciding factor for AWS being chosen, is that we had an organizational suggestion that came down and said, hey, we just signed a contract with AWS. We should really, really use them. Okay, so we have a vendor. We have AWS. Now what? So, how do we go about this? How are we going to set up WordPress in AWS? What about our security setup for the admin? What about the redirects? How do we handle those? Are we thinking moving our entire DNS to Amazon? A lot of questions ensued out of this. So we needed a phased approach. In our discovery, we had to discover, what options do we have with AWS? You could have a traditional LAMP stack. Those are fairly straightforward to set up. There's even AWS Lightsail to, set those up, in an afternoon. However, since we were moving our www to the platform and we had all these redirects, one of the things in our research we discovered is that if we had a traditional stack, this build could be very large. so large that we couldn't really estimate it, just because we didn't know how many people are hitting our redirects on a regular basis. We didn't have the statistics to really judge that effectively. So that's really a hard sell on stakeholders to say, we're going to go ahead and move this to AWS and your traditional stack. We have no idea how much it's going to cost. So we went through the process of building out a traditional stack, ramping up our EC2 instances, databases, all this stuff. But then we had this, kind of a different thought that I'll get to in a moment. But one thing we realized is we had to do this phase approach. We need to break things up. There's just too many things running continual process with us. Like I said, our client projects, our maintenance, day-to-day operations. We had to stock shark repellent. I mean, we're getting rained on with sharks and tornadoes. So maybe that bullet should be a little bit higher up. Let's get shark repellent first, then worry about how we're going to do this. So phase one. We had, as I mentioned, we had this idea of, hey, what if we made everything static in AWS on their S3? It's fast. It doesn't expose our admin, so it's secure, and it's available to multiple regions and zones. So it's going to be even quicker than what our current VM structure was of being located in Southern California. This is now hitting a global level that anywhere in the world is going to get this content that much faster and quicker. So that's what we did. We actually went through a whole big process and went through some prototyping and reviewed a bunch of different plugins and what options we had available to us. And what we ended up rolling out with was we published our own multi-site instance on our VMs, and we still leveraged our current workflow of publishing our themes out of our private repositories into the S3 buckets. But we had also our admins be able to, with our own custom plugin, be able to publish the content that they would develop. And what this allowed us to do is we had this admin URL that people would go to, log in, as any other WordPress, see the changes that they're making. This acted as our staging site for them. And then when they're happy with everything looks good, they would go ahead and publish to Amazon. It would run through, fetching all the index pages and all the different posts and creating static versions of these and posting them out to our S3 buckets. So now our posts, our index, all of our information, all of our assets are out there. And I should say our assets are really published by the Amazon S3 offload plugin for us. But when somebody goes to our www.usc.edu or emergencyusc.edu, it would go through CloudFront and hit these S3 buckets. And so, it works. And it did it. We did it. We launched this back in May of 2017. It's been great ever since. And, the only question that came out of this is, well, what difference does this make? So I'm going to go back and, revisit our primary criteria for this of, what things did we tackle? What things did we achieve with this? So, one of the things that we want to make sure is, getting a responsive homepage. This we actually conquered in a multi-phase approach where while we were busy working on the architecture for getting this to work in AWS, we had moved from our old CMS into a WordPress instance, and we had to modify a couple different items on there, and enhance a couple of the different items. Make sure we have responsive images, make our features a little bit more easy to update and control, as well as shifting some things from older technologies to newer technologies. So in this process, we did go ahead and we got rid of the mobile only version. We combined the two. We now have, completely responsive version of our homepage. So it's always great. One code base, one code base to control them all. It's great. It's wonderful and allows us to, not have to worry about testing multiple different environments and different browsers for all these different platforms. So go ahead. Yes, check mark. We did that one. Yay. Emergency notifications, as I mentioned before we'd have, Blogger overtaking the entire site, or we just have things, kind of fit into previous content holes. So now instead, we have our emergency site that's always up. It doesn't overtake the homepage, but we have information feeding from it into our homepage using the WordPress API, which we, publish out to Amazon S3. And so our homepage is always looking for this feed. If it finds information there, it says, hey, yeah, cool. All right, we've got a notification. We're just going to go ahead and post that here. And we have 3 different levels of notification, depending on the severity. Obviously, sharks, tornadoes, pretty severe. We're going to overtake the whole homepage of it. Just FYI, there's sharks coming down, tornadoes. So, check mark. We got emergency notifications on the homepage. Update the emergency site branding. Well, in the previous screenshots, you could see, it's not that Blogger wasn't bad. It's just it didn't mesh. Didn't mesh well with what we were doing currently with our environments and some of the themes that we're developing for USC and some of the newer sites that we're rolling out. So this was cleaner. It was easier to read. One quick look, and now you know if everything's okay, right? If it's good, it's a little green check mark. If it's not, hey, sharks and tornadoes in LA. It's a little exclamation point, like, this is not normal. This is not how things should be. So, we're giving people that initial visual cue. So yeah, we updated the emergency site branding. Cool, check mark. Administration usability. It's not really a screenshot for this. We migrated to WordPress from our older CMS. So yay, check mark. Admin's very happy with that. It's something they're very used to. No more remembering, how did we do a post in that older CMS and where did we do it? Security and technical considerations. Well, as I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we had something resilient and scalable for traffic spikes. We had done load balancing tests. We, had hit the test environment with it, and everything came out fine, and which was great. We did, however, have an emergency incident at USC in October of last year. It turned out to be a false report, thank God. But during that period, we did experience a traffic spike. We had no outage to our emergency site or homepage, any of our redirects or anything. And these are actual screenshots from, our cloud monitoring admin dashboard. And, for this spike, when this actually happened, we did see an increase of over 1,000% in traffic to our homepage. I'm not entirely sure how, if we didn't, ramp up an EC2 instance with the databases correctly, we might have had outages during this period. Our emergency site, over 25,000% increase during this incident. So, is it resilient, scalable? Yeah, I'd say so. Good check mark on that one. Decreasing the load time. So as I mentioned before, this wasn't, a slow site previously. But as you can see here, red's bad, green's good, yay. On our original site, we had a decent speed index, 2380. Our first interactive byte was just a little over 3 seconds and fully loaded, a little over 4. So again, pretty respectable. But as you can see, we weren't really taking a full advantage of a CDN or compressing too many things. So during the refactor phase, when we moved this over to WordPress, we got into a WordPress instance and we worked on getting, a little bit more responsive images in there. We did have some increase in our, or I should say, we had a very large decrease in the amount of requests that we were making and the bytes being delivered. But again, like you see, we weren't fully taking advantage of our CDN. Again, this was only prototyping phase, so we didn't have everything fully set up at that point. But when we moved over to AWS, we could see, the difference between a traditional LAMP stack and how having a static site on AWS is that our speed index, since it's being hit from S3, so wherever the server is calling, it's calling to the nearest S3 instance of whatever geographic region it's in. If we take a look at our original and our AWS, we decreased that, by nearly half or less than half for our speed index. Our fully loaded page load time went from 4 seconds to less than 2. Our total bytes, because we were compressing our images better, and all of our scripts using an automatic build process with Gulp, we were able to decrease this all while at the same time. If you look at our requests, we actually increased our request from the refactored prototype to the AWS version, because during that time we had added in the emergency feeds. We were actually using a plugin for our features that pulled in some additional scripts. So all these extra features rolled in. We had some more images into the footer than is based on during the discovery phase of more information we need to communicate to our users. So we actually increased the amount of actual files that we're delivering to people, but yet everything is faster and quicker, and we're almost green across the board. All of our first byte time, compression of images, and our transfers are all great. Our static content is, well, that's got a B, and I'm still going to figure out what the one item in there is giving me a B on there, because I'm not happy with that. But everything else is much better. So decrease load time. All right, check mark. Move the application to the cloud. So with this one, I'm sorry, go back on that. We wanted to, this phased approach. We knew that we had a lot to bite off in order to do this. So we had to break this up. After researching and prototyping, we couldn't do it all at once. So we did put all the WordPress instance on our internal VMs, just so that we didn't have to figure out the whole, how do we manage security? Is it fully secure? Run through security audits, all this, and we don't want to shortchange that process, right? But in order to make sure that we got this out quickly, we said, okay, let's go ahead and put all of this on our internal VMs, and we'll create the plugins that we need to publish up to S3. Then we'll go ahead and work on, moving this administration part of WordPress into the cloud. And this allowed us to get, the public-facing side of this out onto S3 much quicker, which of course makes everybody happy, right? This one thing you always show, hey, you bump into your CIO in the hallway, like, hey, the homepage and emergencies in the cloud. That's a good plus. So because the admin's not in the cloud, it's still in our internal VMs. We'll give ourselves a half check mark on that one. So that leaves us, what's our next steps? We're in phase 2 currently, right now, and we had all this architecture put together for WordPress in the cloud on AWS using their AMIs. We are a good portion through this, and then we're nearly there, almost complete the architecture. But then there was we had a departmental decision to standardize development by using Docker for projects. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it just means a different approach. Amazon AMIs, Amazon Machine Images, are like VMs in AWS. So if you're using VMs or anything, it's it's a little bit more straightforward to transition into that. They're also optimized to run in AWS. That's why they released them. Amazon worked on these, and they integrate with their own systems very easily and quickly. So we had this approach as it was along Amazon's somewhat best practices. However, after finding out we're going to use Docker, we do a little bit more digging and research, and we find out that people that have used that AMIs, they also have their issues with maintenance and bug creep because it is a VM. So, duplicating those, scaling those up, if you introduce one thing, one spot may not be the other. It sometimes can lead to problems if you don't architect it very well. Docker, if anyone's not familiar with Docker, they're containers that run applications, and you can, spool them up really quickly to offset your loads. Let's say you needed your MySQL or your Apache or Nginx running. You could get multiple instances of your Nginx, running on multiple Docker instances across, a server cluster. So, moving over to Docker, hey, this may be a good thing. It segments our development and our different items into more container model. The longevity, this is probably going to be better for us. So let's go ahead and scrap the AMI approach. We're just going to get rid of all these things, and then now we're going to have WordPress and AWS now with Docker. So again, here we have where we're going to have our different availability zones that are running, Docker containers of all of our different instances. So if we do need to scale up, they can scale up more efficiently, quickly, and it could be handled on more of an automated process. I didn't put our continuous integration and continuous delivery deployment for our prototyping phase in here, just because we really are still trying to figure out, are we going to use AWS code pipeline and code delivery, or are we going to use, GitHub and Circle CI or some other approach? So we're still weighing those benefits out currently. Once I know, I will let everyone else in here know. So what did we learn? Throughout this whole process, AWS discoveries, well, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Your traffic really does matter when you're switching over to AWS. If you want to set up a traditional stack, make sure what you want to cover in there, or what you're going to be delivering, and what your anticipated needs are. Like I said, this was for our homepage and our emergency. We knew we were going to get a lot of traffic to it. We were going to get a lot of spikes during particular school events throughout the year. But we also had a plan for other elements, sharks and tornadoes. Or realistically, I should say, we live in a geographic region where geologic events are a consideration for Southern California. So that was, one of the main reasons for getting our services outside of our internal services, that if there was something as a earthquake or whatever, we still had a method of getting that information out to people outside the LA region. So provisioning EC2 instances within AWS, well, those could scale up. That's not a problem. Provisioning your database instance, this is where it gets tricky. You kind of have to anticipate of, I'm going to have 1,000 users, or I'm going to have 1 million users. You kind of need to know that in advance. And if you think you might get 1 million users, you should scale up and plan for 1 million users. Maybe use a automated tool for tracking that, like New Relic or something, to see what your site, what your actual traffic is, so you know how to scale your database accordingly. Only because based on our research, we found that you could change your database instance within AWS, but it's still a manual process. It does take about 15 minutes. So if all of a sudden you start getting hit hard, you don't want to then find out that you need to scale up and then possibly have outages during that scale up period. Now, are there restrictions to what we did? Absolutely. If you're putting your entire static files into S3, WordPress is going to work as the admin, but you have to really think about your URL structures. We had split up our S3 buckets to handle these. So we have our primary buckets for handling the index pages, and then we have any subset posts or pages going to our post bucket. So what does that mean? The URL endpoints are not dynamic in this sense. So if you were to create a category, some dynamic category name, news or events or whatever you choose, it's going to resolve to /post name. You don't really get to choose. It's not going to create them on the fly for you. So you have to take that into consideration. And considering our homepage really links off to our news site and our emergency is only for a couple of posts at a time, this wasn't a major concern for us. But you definitely don't want to, host something that has a couple hundred or a couple thousand posts in this method. There's going to be better ways to architect and scale for that. Some takeaways, as I mentioned, you have to determine what you want from AWS. Do you want a full stack? Do you want to create a single page app? There's a really good speaking session last year about using WordPress and high performance for AWS. That's a great one. On doing a full stack is by Wiham Moulter. And you can find it within the sessions for the 2017 in-person one on that sessions speaker page. As far as the headless CMS, there was a good one earlier this morning by Ben Moore, headless and brainless CMS. I highly suggest checking out that one. So, look at those if you're looking for a full stack or a single page application. Eventually, we probably might go to SPAs for our homepage. It's just, for our resources, for any one of our developers to be able to change something quickly. So people could be on vacation or be out sick. We chose WordPress as our primary publishing tool and are just publishing out the static versions. A phased approach allowed us to release updates more quickly. So if you have that opportunity, if you're going to go through this similar type of process, I highly recommend trying to break it up. Don't try to bite it all off at once. It's a lot to deal with. And your project shouldn't have an end to it, but really, every project's going to have a start, but, you should really plan to have an enhanced delivery program. You have, milestones that you're either delivering new features or maybe updating the design and the look and feel based on feedback. Don't ever think of when you do a project like that, that's just going to end. And having a CI/CD architecture for that is going to allow you to iterate that a lot more easily. It's not crucial and critical. It's just going to make you sleep better at night knowing that the next thing that you roll out, running through an automated test process, that it didn't break something else that you already done maybe 6 months ago, and maybe didn't test against. So that's always a positive in my view bug. Hey, maybe there should be a CI/CD session at WPCampus. So just some disclaimers. We are not affiliated with AWS. I'm not affiliated with AWS. James Hong is not affiliated with AWS. We don't get anything for talking about AWS. We are not perfect. If you see this and you think, oh, there's a better way, or we've done this and we've done it in a better way, great, cool. Please let us know. Like I said, this is based off of our research amongst juggling 100 other things and, rolling this out so we could have a static site within AWS and always have our homepage and emergency sites up. So one final note that I have is, not all sharks are bad. Had the wonderful chance to work with Bruce here during a mock emergency drill. Really great fish. He likes sushi. Just watch him when he hits the sake a little too hard. And that's it. I thank you. Again, I am Jason Calls. My Twitter handle is Troutacular. If you decide to hashtag this, use that home in the cloud, and here are links to my presentation. So I guess we'll open it up to questions. So if I understand this correctly, you take a WordPress site and publish a static version of it to S3. Can you talk a little bit more about what tools you use to do this? So as I mentioned, we use S3 offload to offload all of our images and media assets. So that's widely available. It's ready to go. However, whenever I go to a conference and see something like this, I'm like, cool, give me the code. I'm sorry, I don't have a Git repository for anyone to copy and paste and, really roll this out. Maybe we will one day, but it is really pretty specific to our needs currently. So, we kind of rolled our own, and, we use the APIs to go ahead and get a complete WordPress load of our pages of each post. So it cycles through all the posts and the index page and creates static versions of those and publishes those out to our S3 buckets. So it does go through them one by one by one by one by one. Again, hence why I would say don't do this if you have hundreds of posts or thousands of posts, because each time someone makes an update, use to publish to AWS, it's going to take a while. I guess one of the other things I probably should have mentioned in this is, when you're setting up your S3 buckets, make sure that you're paying attention to your cache timeouts. So this is something that you have to take in consideration. Unlike traditional caching, there's no like, hey, go ahead and reset my cache. Once it's out on S3, it is there. Depending on what cache levels you set to. So our homepage is set to, I want to say 5 minutes currently. It might be 1. I think we actually might have it at 1 currently. And our emergency is set to 1 minute. So anytime somebody publishes something, it's going to be out there, but at the most, it's going to be out there for a minute. So I hope that answers your question. And also from Bethany, what tool did you use for speed testing? I use webpagetest.org. I love that site. I've been using that for a very long time, and it is great. The best part about it is you can test, geographic locations. You can test using different browsers. You can test using mobile devices. You can throttle the speeds. So there's an infinite amount of testing available to you on there. And as a matter of fact, I would like to probably enhance onto this. I want to do a test of, I still have the old homepage in a secret dark location, and I want to test that against our new one out of China, out of Beijing. Or we have a lot of students, that come to USC. From different parts of Asia. So I really want to see, what speed increase did we see beyond just, the US? What speed did we see increase, for Asia or Africa and Europe? But webpagetest.org, great testing tool. Again, if anyone knows of other ones, hey, let me know. I'm all about testing and getting those nice little A's on your report card. Okay. Next, from Sarah Clark. Did you use any other services besides EC2, S3, and CloudFront? Did you use Route 53 to make your DNS global as well? We considered this. We had considered this, but that was at the time it was relinquishing everything off the AWS. So we are keeping our DNS internally. We just changed our CNAME over for www over to AWS. Who knows? Maybe in the future that might be a consideration. But I'm not entirely sure. For people that know more into DNS, and please don't quote me on this. This is only what I heard in conjecture at the coffee machine one day. Is that of DNS machines, there's originally 6 super DNS machines, and USC was one of them. So who knows if we'll move that or migrate that. It's kind of cool to say, hey, we were one of the original 6. Again, this is just what I heard the coffee machine, so don't quote me on that. But no, we did not move our DNS over to Route 53. Okay, so Adam, why use CloudFront in front of the emergency site? What do you have the caching TTL set to for content from the origin bucket? Okay, so we have it going through CloudFront just to tell it where to go, so that way when people are coming in, it's hitting those Amazon services again by geographic location much faster. So then it'll go to the S3 bucket. For setting the cache on there, we do actually have a manual script process that we run. So each time that I go and release a theme, upgrade release, I'm publishing that out to S3, and I run a script that will go ahead and set the cache headers to those automatically based on our rules. But by default, it doesn't do it. So that's another part of what we want to solve, to have it be more of an automated process. And that's what's going to be in our continuous integration deployment. So please let me know if I didn't answer that fully and clearly. Okay. From Kevin, are you an Internet 2 institution? Are you able to route traffic from other EDUs to S3 over I2? Are you paying commodity pricing for that bandwidth? To be honest, I have no idea. That is going to be a question for our networking people, and I'm going to copy and paste this down. I'm going to go see them tomorrow, and I will try to get that answer for you and ping you back. But I apologize, I don't know that off the top of my head. Okay, from Stacy. How did you deal with moving pages such as post with comments or forms can be submitted? Okay, so there's no really comments for our homepage or our emergency, so it wasn't really a consideration. Now, if this had been a consideration, then I would have said, yes, we have to go with an SPA implementation for this. But it wasn't really for that. Again, if you're going to have, a bunch of posts with comments, it's not undoable to do this approach. You just might want to rethink. You might want to build something a little bit more where you're maybe using a Lambda function within AWS to go ahead and, get the request for the content that maybe stores that, caches that, and then you have your comments pulled in with a regular, query call at the time of a load instance, because really you never want to cache your comments. But for this instance, it wasn't really a criteria. It's not like if we had, on our emergency site, there's sharks and tornadoes coming down, and somebody posting, yeah, what a bummer, just fought off a great white, and Stan over there, he is messing around with a tiger shark. This is really just a one-way directional communication method. But if that would have been a consideration, like I said, go take a look at the Headless and Brainless CMS by Ben Moore, his slides from earlier. Or like I said, you could host your entire WordPress instance in AWS with the traditional stack method. Like I said, you can even go sign up for Lightsail or something like that, for a trial run for a month and, develop a WordPress instance in that. That's all using AWS infrastructure. It's just a kind of a scaled down one from the full, robust, you control and decide everything traditional AWS method. But I thank everyone for being here, taking the time out of your day. So if there's any other questions, and if you don't feel you don't have them now, just go ahead and ping me at my Twitter handle, and I'll try to answer them as much as I can.